is try to show you what I saw. Try to show you what the city of Babylon looks like today.
And yet to say that the study of the word as words and propositions on a page is not an end in itself.
The Bible's a revelation of the character and the will of God.
So of the many excavations that have taken place in Babylon, the most important one, from this vantage point, the ancient wall line of Babylon's eastern city wall can be seen.
2,500 years ago, a Jewish exile sitting in Babylon wrote down a countdown, a mathematical prophecy so specific that it names a number of years, ties it to a real historical decree, and claims to predict the exact moment a coming leader would be cut off. For centuries, that countdown has been argued over by rabbis, monks, historians, and theologians. Now, researchers running the text through modern computational and AI-assisted analysis say something unsettling. 69 of the 70 segments in that countdown appear to already be finished, and only one is left. Share this with everyone you know, because whether or not you believe a word of it theologically, this is one of the oldest mathematical predictions in human history, and people are running it through 2026 level analysis right now. Before we go further, subscribe to Vault of Discovery. We take ancient claims seriously enough to actually check the math. Here's where this begins. The prophecy sits in chapter 9 of the book of Daniel, delivered, according to the text, by the angel Gabriel to Daniel while he was praying in exile in Babylon, worried that Israel's 70 years of captivity were about to end. Gabriel's answer wasn't the reassurance Daniel expected. Instead, he was given a new number, 70 weeks, or in Hebrew, 77s, a term scholars broadly translate not as 70 literal weeks, but as 70 periods of 7 years, a total span of 490 years. The prophecy breaks that 490-year span into 3 blocks, 7 sevens, another 62 sevens, and one final 7, and it ties the starting point to a specific, real historical event, a decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Think about what makes this different from vague, poetic prophecy. This isn't someday a great leader will rise. This is a text handing you a start date, a unit of measurement, and a math problem. That's exactly why it's remained one of the most fought-over passages in the entire Hebrew Bible for 2,000 years. Because unlike most prophecy, it can actually be tested against the calendar. Here's the first twist. Depending on which historical decree you use as the starting point, the math lands somewhere very close to the life of Jesus of Nazareth. Using the decree of King Artaxerxes recorded in the book of Nehemiah, dated by most historians to around 445 or 444 BCE. 69 of the 77s, or 483 years, land in the range of 29 to 33 CE, which overlaps with the traditional dating of Jesus' public ministry and crucifixion. That convergence is why generations of Christian scholars, going back at least as far as the early church father Jerome, have argued this passage is a direct, timed prediction of the Messiah's arrival and death, as documented in analysis from Never Thirsty's Biblical Studies project. But here's the second twist, and it's the one modern researchers keep running into. The math doesn't cleanly land on one universally agreed date. It depends entirely on which starting decree you choose, whether you use 360-day prophetic years instead of standard 365-day years, and how you count the gap between 1 BCE and 1 CE, since there was no year 0. Different scholars, using slightly different assumptions, land anywhere from 29 CE to the early 40s CE. Even Wikipedia's own historical summary of the prophecy notes that critical scholars have called the history of interpreting this passage a dismal swamp of competing calculations, with disagreements stretching back to the earliest centuries of Jewish and Christian exegesis. In other words, the math works, but only if you're willing to pick your starting assumptions first, and then check whether they land where you wanted them to. That's an important flag, because it's exactly the kind of ambiguity that any AI or computational model asked to solve this prophecy has to grapple with too. Feed a language model or a chronology calculator the raw text of Daniel 9, and it will do exactly what human scholars have done for 2,000 years. It will produce a range of possible dates depending on which historical anchor point and calendar system you tell it to use. It doesn't magically resolve the ambiguity. It just runs the arithmetic faster and lays out the competing possibilities side by side. Here's the third twist. and it's the one behind "the final week has already begun" claim in this video's title. Most traditional Christian interpreters agree that 69 of the 77s have already played out in history. But there's a long-standing, deeply debated idea, most associated with a reading called dispensationalism, developed in the 19th century, that there is a gap between the 69th and 70th seven, a pause in the prophetic countdown that has now lasted roughly 2,000 years. Under this reading, the church age is essentially a suspended clock, and the final 7-year period, commonly called the tribulation, hasn't started yet, but will begin when a future world leader confirms a peace agreement involving Israel, as laid out in this interpretation of Daniel 9:27. It's important to be direct about what this actually is. It's one specific popular interpretive framework, not a consensus reading, and not a claim that mainstream biblical scholarship treats as settled fact. Plenty of serious scholars reject the gap theory entirely, arguing the 70th week was fulfilled in the 1st century alongside the other 69, tied to events like the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Others read the entire prophecy as describing events from the Maccabean period centuries before Jesus, tied to the desecration of the Jerusalem temple under a Greek ruler, not to any future tribulation at all, a reading with substantial scholarly support in critical biblical studies, as Wikipedia's overview of the prophecy's academic history makes clear. The final week has already begun framing is a claim made within one particular theological tradition. It is not something that's been independently verified as a historical fact by AI or otherwise. What AI-assisted analysis genuinely is good at here is something narrower but still interesting, cross-referencing the astronomical, calendrical, and historical records tied to Persian king lists, Julian and Hebrew calendar conversions, and the timing of events like Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, doing in seconds what earlier scholars like Sir Robert Anderson spent years calculating by hand in the 19th century. That kind of computational cross-checking is exactly what's driving renewed interest in this prophecy right now. Not because a machine cracked a code, but because it's now trivially easy to test dozens of chronological assumptions against the historical record at once and see which combinations line up. Think about what that actually leaves us with. The 490-year structure is real, ancient, and mathematically explicit. That part isn't in dispute. The convergence with the traditional dating of Jesus' ministry is a documented historical curiosity that has fascinated scholars for 2 millennia. But the leap from 69 periods have passed to "the tribulation has already quietly started right now" is a theological interpretation resting on a specific reading of a text gap that many equally serious scholars don't accept exists at all. One thing is absolutely certain. The prophecy of 70 weeks in Daniel 9 is one of the oldest, most mathematically specific predictions in religious history, and its numbers really do land suspiciously close to real, datable events in the 1st century. What's far less certain is the claim that we are currently living inside the paused final segment of that countdown. That's not something modern computation has proven. It's an interpretation, a compelling one to those inside that tradition, deeply contested by scholars outside it. And no AI model, however fast its arithmetic, can resolve a 2,000-year theological disagreement about which calendar you're supposed to start counting from.